I just want to say a few things about the timing of the CS and the US. Now, the CS first is called an NS, a neutral stimulus. And then if learning occurs, if there's an association made between that neutral stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus, such that the neutral stimulus starts eliciting a conditioned response, a CR. That's when we call it a CS. As a shortcut, I'll probably always just call it a CS. Now, in your book, pages 123 to 125 in the 4th edition, it covers this, the options of when do you like turn on the tone versus present the shock. That's the same as when do you ring the bell versus put the meat powder on the dog's tongue. What's the timing of all that? And the book has these graphs that should help, so I'll just review a little bit to make sure you understand what the graphs are saying. So for most of our examples so far, we've done something that's called delayed conditioning. And so if we have our US, which is the food, let's say, and it's being paired with some kind of tone, I'm going to draw a line, and this line refers to time. So let's say this is time, and when it goes up, that means the tone has come on, okay? So it's on, it turns off, okay? So I'm going to write tone on, tone off. Now, in the delayed conditioning procedure, what will be the CS, the tone, is turned on, it goes for a while, and then the US is turned on later. So there's like a delay before the US also turns on. That's where you get the delay. So let's say we have a tone for a while, then we get the US, and typically they're gonna fall off, be turned off at the same time, right? So now, actually, we would study classical conditioning. To study it in a lab, we would use a rat, and this is called conditioned emotional response. We'll be getting to that shortly. And this tone might actually predict a shock. So this might be tone, I've got a tone playing, and then a shock comes on. The tone is still playing, but they turn off together. Okay. So this is called delayed. Now, to do the trace conditioning procedure, all I'm going to do is turn my tone off first, just for a little bit, and then do the shock. So the trace is actually, think of a memory trace. The animal has to remember there's going to be a little space in between the CS and the US, and your memory has to kind of tie it over. And sometimes it's also called trace gap, which I like better because we think of the gap. So how would that look like if we were to draw it with this kind of graph? Well, we would have our CS come on and turn off, and then the US would have to be presented just a little bit after the CS. Now, this can be a really short gap. I mean, a couple milliseconds or a second. As you get very long in the gap between the CS and the US, learning's going to start to fall off. The association's going to be harder to make. Rats and pigeons, you get a bit of a gap, and it gets harder for them to make an association. Think about this. If you played a tone and then waited, gave the dog a treat, the longer you wait, the harder it is to make the connection. Where if you're like ringing a bell, let's say, making a noise and go, here, Skippy, come get your treat, and you stop, give him the treat right away, there's still a small little break. He wasn't hearing the bell while he was eating the food, but if it's small enough, he's going to make the connection. So this is what's called trace, a trace conditioning procedure. Then there's just two more. There's simultaneous, which, what do you think? The CS and the US are going to both come on together and turn off together. And then backwards is when the US actually comes on first, and then the CS comes later. And you could do backwards conditioning kind of like either one of these. They might turn off together, there might be a small little break, but the big thing in backward conditioning is the US is actually presented first, and then the CS, which is typically a predictor, is actually after the event. Now, because CSs are useful to us because they help us predict things that are going to happen. We can associate, like, oh, there's a really dark clouds. It might rain later. I should bring my umbrella. Or, when I see that face, I know somebody's about to say something terrible to me or say something nice. It helps us predict and kind of work in our environment and know what to expect. Now, if the CS is coming after the event, it's not very helpful to me, is it? Thanks for nothing. you know, the event already happened. So, but I may still make a connection and I may still make an association, even when it's after the fact. As you read in your book, this will usually be in situations where maybe it's something that we're preconditioned to learn, meaning, you know, predisposed, like genetically we're set up to learn certain things quickly. You'll notice people that have phobias, there's certain phobias that are more common: heights, creepy crawlies, things that maybe actually were, you know, dangerous to us when we're out living in the savannah or wherever we were roaming around. And it was good to be quick to be afraid of certain things. Now in our environment, that may not be adaptive. You may not really run into snakes very often, you know, and you're not really going to fall off a cliff because just, you know, even when you're on top of a building, there's a wall there and you're probably not going to fall over. But for your ancestors, it's a really good idea. Like, you know, the guys that were afraid of being, hey, look at this, we're really high up, look how high up we are. The guys that got too close were like, oh, and the guys that were like, oh, I'll just stay back here, thanks. Those guys had offspring, and they had offspring, and they are our ancestors. The guys that got too close, not our ancestors. So we are predisposed to learn certain things, and those may be things that backward conditioning can actually work for. Now, I recommend you try the practice problem with flower and pollen and sneezing. It's number 8 on probably page 126 in your book, and kind of, you know, try labeling these, because your quiz is about labeling the examples, and you only get 2 tries because I want you to really show me that you got this. So practice it first, ask me if you have questions, and then do the quiz. Cool.